Hello everyone and welcome to the second workshop of the event. Why your mod feels flat, layers of player feedback by Joe. So here we go.
Phenomenal stuff. All right. Welcome, everyone. So, today we're going to talk about why your mod feels flat, layers of player feedback. I'll explain exactly what that, specifically means for us as we go through. Small sort of content walkthrough. We'll talk about what is feedback. So, what I would, basically say is feedback. Then, why do you even need it in your mod or your game? And then I'll go through a couple of layers of feedback that you can sort of think about. And finally, some closing words and even further reading some other resources that are really useful to look at. The first thing to note over here is when we talk about feedback, we're talking about game design, and game design is equal to mod design, right? Because at this point, modding and game development are basically just sort of, just a different side of the same coin. And so anything that applies to game design really does also apply to mod design. Although there is a level to this, of course, because when you're making a mod, you already have a game to work off of. You sometimes have it actually a little bit easier than if you want to create something from nothing, basically, right? Because if you're making a game, you have like a completely blank page and you have to write everything yourself. But for mod, you have a lot of things that you can fall back on in the game itself. And when we talk about feedback, then yes, like the player is giving you feedback, right? That's playing your mod or your game, but you also have to provide them feedback. And that feedback is, it can be called game feel, but there's no real sort of formal definition that's agreed upon. But sometimes you might have heard things like, oh, the timing is a little bit weird. This shotgun doesn't feel good to use. Something feels off. It's like something that you can't really put your finger on, but you can feel it. It's intangible. So I said that it's more art than it's science. And it also sometimes relies on a shared understanding, right? Generally speaking, it's like hard to measure the feedback that you're giving the player. But generally speaking, the idea is that there's some shared understanding. This is where it sometimes changes from genre to genre, but there are some things that are basically available for every genre. So it's a very generalized thing. So one thing, for example, if you see these red barrels in a game, I would say that about 99.9% of people are immediately going to know what happens if you were to shoot them in a game. They would explode. That's the shared understanding, and that's the feedback. So that's sometimes where in an FPS game, this makes total sense. In other games, it might not. Then when we are, let's go one further. So this one right here, for example, if you see this monster, you have never heard about Singularity in the game, but if you see this monster, where could feasibly be the place to shoot it in order to damage it? It's very straightforward, right? The feedback is built in, so to speak. Obviously, boom, right freaking here, because there's a huge, there's a huge monster with a glowing sack right there, and that's sort of the feedback that the player needs in order to actually know what do I even need to do. And of course, this goes deeper, right? I mean, there's some particles, there's hurt sounds, and there's animations that can happen. I mean, then, you can see that here there was a sack before, so things disappear. So things still change, but the feedback is, the game basically tells you, hey, how is this going to, should you use it? So it doesn't always need to be realistic, right? But it needs to be fun. So does it make sense that there's a huge monster with glowing sacks that you have to shoot, and that actually is the thing that damages it? It's probably not realistic. But the point about it is that it's probably going to be fun. Because if you don't know what is going on and you're confused, that's probably one of the worst things that can happen for fun. And generally speaking, when it comes to feedback, it's really easy sort of to add the sort of first steps. And it's like easy to understand the basics, but it is incredibly hard to master. I would never claim that I'm a master at it, far from it. It's just that it's really useful to take things that are sort of implicit, because you could be like, well, yeah, this is like, oh, we already know these things. Well, most of the time it's very implicit knowledge. You're like, oh, I know that red barrels can be shot. I know that, glowing things on monsters are probably going to be the weak points. But it's really useful to make these explicit, because very often these implicit things are it's better to just lay them out to have a full understanding of them. Yeah, and then obviously you can go either too little feedback or too much feedback. I would say that generally speaking, it's probably better to go for a little bit too much feedback than not enough. Although, mileage may vary, because obviously you can go too crazy with 1,000 sound effects and shaking screens and all of that stuff. So striking a balance is really the difficult thing, because you also have so many different dials to turn, right? We'll see that in a bit. Why do you even want feedback in your game, right? Like, why do you want to have this better design? Well, first of all, you give the direction player. You give the direction player. You give direction to your players, so they know what to do. So feedback basically can give your player a sense of what to do next. A well-designed system basically tells you how it should be used, and a good design in that case is going to limit options. So here is a great example that probably everyone has run into, maybe even literally. If you see these handles on a door, do you push or do you pull? Exactly. You don't know, because you could do either. And it doesn't matter what sign is written on that door. Someone's going to try to pull it. Someone's going to try to push it, even though it's the exact opposite. It's basically a coin toss. That's kind of a bad design, right? Because it doesn't tell you how to use it. Versus if you had something like this, where it's just a plate, there's physically no way that you can pull the door open, right? So in this case, the design itself limits the options. So that means that, like, the more constrained, or you constrain the design so that it immediately tells you how you should interact with it. Another thing to think about, like, sometimes people could be like, is the game even working? A pertinent example of that was, this is an anecdote, not really game, but because it's sort of design philosophy related. We once ordered a pizza via its own website. Like, the pizza place had its own website, and it was like an old school HTML form, right? Just like you fill stuff out, and then you click that old school HTML button, and then the form was sent off. I didn't get an email. I didn't get a confirmation message, nothing. And I was like, that's weird. So I reloaded the page, and then the pop-up came up. It's like, do you want to submit this form again? And I was like, well, if the form is submitted, then surely this is fine, right? So we waited 30 minutes. And after those quite anxiety-ridden 30 minutes, then the pizza arrived. Still, though, not a good experience. And that's sort of the point, right? The point is that you want to take the some of the sort of, I don't know, you want to take the anxiety out of things. That's why when you save a game, basically every single time you have to have a pop-up that's like, game saved, or, I don't know, successfully saved the game, something like that. Because if you don't have that, then the person's going to be like, is the game actually saved? They might save it 2 or 3 times. It just doesn't make any sense in that case. So fundamentally speaking, if you interact with any sort of system, you should get feedback. Let's see a couple of examples in that in a second. But one example would be, would be when you are in an FPS and you are, your magazine is empty. If you then fire an empty gun, you would probably expect something like a click, right? Or some sort of feedback that you're like, hey, is there something happening? If there was nothing, it would be a little bit weird. So it's about meeting expectations to some degree as well. That goes a little bit back to the shared language, where, sort of FPS hit markers are expected, but that's also because they're satisfying, right? It's like, oh, you're doing something good. You get positive feedback in that sense. The click on the empty magazine, when you have low health, it's like you get SFX get like damped, they get slowed down, you get red borders around the screen, there's blinking SFX, the health bar gets highlighted, maybe time slows down. There's all sorts of things that make it more visceral, right? It's almost like it actually stimulates and simulates the actual feeling, the state of low health. Like, it actually sort of brings you into the experience. So good design on this feedback that you're giving to the players can also enhance the entire experience of the game itself. And really what it all boils down to why this is being done is for fun, right? The point of the mod or game, hopefully, should be that the player at the end of the day has a good experience and has fun playing it. And it just makes a better experience. Confused, if your player or the user is confused, that's rarely a good thing. It might be in a puzzle game, but now we get to like edge cases of edge cases. I don't think that that's necessarily the good idea. And when we talk about sort of what types of feedback to give, well, we have, broadly speaking, 5 senses. You can probably expand this a little bit depending on, but really the senses that we're talking about here is sight, touch, and hearing. Taste, I don't think that we need a taste controller. I know that there's a smell controller thing in the works, which is, I don't know if this is a good idea. I don't think so, because I don't necessarily need to have smell on, touch is like feel, right? Like, I guess that's the idea. But yeah, broadly speaking, though, we have the 3 senses that we can target in game design. I wouldn't worry about taste or smell that much, even though there might be some developments, but focusing on those is probably the best. And for it, we have the layers of feedback. This is just sort of like a small pyramid over here. The idea is that we start with the visuals as like the ground layer, right? And then we go up. We add some auditory stuff, we add some timing and some haptics, and finally we have harmony where everything sort of fits together. As we go up this chain, it gets a little bit more abstract, let's say. Like when it comes to the visuals, right, which is the first step over here, very straightforward, right? You got UI. These are often sort of objective measures, right? Like how much health do you have? You have 5 of 10 health, okay? You have mana bars, you have numbers and dialogue. This is a very sort of, it's a very objective way to give feedback to the player. Absolutely useful and absolutely needed as well. But can sometimes, like if you just put a number on there, most of the time it's going to take more sort of effort for someone to read something than to see an animation. What is it? Is a picture is worth 1,000 words, sort of like that, right? Because we can deduce a picture or a visual often much faster than if it's like written in a text, but still unbelievably important and unbelievably useful. Same thing then goes with animations. So this could be any sort of movement of objects. Are they moving smooth? How are they interacting with the environment? Are there damage animations? So if you damage an enemy, do they recoil? Right, things like that. The recoil of a weapon being fired. So and also to say this is not an exhaustive list at all. There's probably tens of things more that you could feasibly talk about. One really, really important thing is particles. This is the thing that I absolutely love, and most game devs love it because they are one of your best friends because they can do so much in terms of visual feedback, and they are quite sort of, let's say, cost effective in the sense of, number one, for performance, but also for just the ease in which they can be implemented. So you can think about it. You go down to a cellar. You're in a game. You go down to a cellar. The cellar is flooded, and there's like sparks on the wall. I don't need to tell you anything about the rest of this. It's like, oh yeah, if you go into the water, you're probably going to get electrocuted because you saw the sparks. Literally done by like one tiny sort of particle effect. And the same thing goes for all of the different other ones, right? Blood when you strike an enemy, or smoke when there's fire. So the particles are super useful, and basically everyone should be using particles. You shouldn't overuse them, but once again, I think dialing back is often a little bit easier than like dialing up, if that makes sense. And then finally, there's camera effects. You could feasibly also put them into timing. But there's FOV changes. So, for example, when you are drawing back a bow, you might have a FOV change. There might be screen shakes when you get damaged or you do a certain powerful attack. Things like that just add to the entire sort of layer on this. To show a couple of examples of the visuals over here, this is a generic example. We'll have this one right here. So this is sort of expanding the idea of the visuals. So we start off with this, where, okay, I can move and now it's done. The game's over. I got nothing. I didn't even know that I was able to move. I didn't even know that was my enemy. We could maybe deduce it via red, but okay, there's something lacking. Let's go up one level. All of a sudden, okay, we're starting to see a little bit more. Okay, now we had entered sort of the second level where we got a couple of animation, or not animations, but like we got actual visuals of the player. We got a visual of the enemy. But can we go further? Of course we can. Now we get some feedback in terms of the health bar over here. And we also have some animations of the player. So that player now has animations. And now we get some knockback when the player is hit. And now, boom, we even have a death animation. So you're starting to stack these different layers on top of each other. Like I said, most of this is going to be implicitly known. Most of the stuff it makes sense. But once again, you want to try to spill everything implicit out explicitly. Because if you have it implicitly, then it's just much harder to then improve it. That's the issue. Now we get the next one where, for example, the game doesn't even start until I move. So now we have another layer of feedback where it's like, hey, you first of all have to move and then we can go. Now we can also swing the sword over here and we can try to hit the enemy as well. Now that doesn't quite work as intended over here, but as you can see, it still continues to go. So that's another one. And I think 4 is still, yes. And then 4 is sort of the final one where I said you should use particles. So for example, if we use particles, all of a sudden it gets much nicer. So that's the sort of the visual steps over here. And we'll get to the other two with auditory as well in a second. There we go. Just as an example over here for visuals, of course, you can go in many different directions still with this. You can add more things. It's just, like I said, it was just sort of an example. And we'll also see a Hytale example, which I think actually has all of these levels down perfectly and is really freaking cool. Next up is the auditory layer. This one is also, I think that visuals, also easy to start with, very hard to master. Auditory, I think, is harder to even start with. On sort of simple things like a confirmation sound, right? You click a button, there's a button click sound. That's fairly easy, but you should still add these things because at some point you get blind to your own sort of creation. And that's one of the worst things because you're like, oh, I've done this. Like if you've done something like 500 times because you've tested the game over and over or the mod over and over and over again, you don't even notice that there's no confirmation sound. You don't notice that certain things are missing. So that's why, once again, trying to make the implicit explicit and trying to be like, okay, if a new person were to try this, what would happen? That's why one of the best things that you can do is just sit someone down, tell them 0 things about your mod or your game. Just sit them down and just watch them do stuff. Don't tell them anything. Just watch them struggle for 15 minutes and you have so many notes to what you have to improve. It's unbelievable. But yeah, so there's sort of immediate sound effects, right? That get that you can obviously also layer. You also get sort of reactive sound effects, right? So I remember in PUBG, for example, you could have the pan. You could have a pan equipped, and if you had that and you shot that pan, you'd actually get like a clunk sound instead of hitting the enemy. Just small things like that. Even just gonna immerse you way more than you can think. And then polishing things. We know this, from the echo, for example, right? Adaptive sounds. So depending on the environment, you change the way that the sound effects work. All of this is obviously, it can be harder to do inside of a mod, but generally speaking, it's still this like polish that works. And then the masterclass in auditory feedback, which is probably one of the hardest to do, is music. So, for example, sometimes when you have certain pieces of music, you can get the stems, meaning each individual instrument. You could, in theory, get that individually, and adding or subtracting a certain instrument can vastly change the way that the music is sort of interpreted and how it's perceived. And that, for example, that like subtle change can be like, that could be a masterclass. Unbelievably difficult to do, of course, but it can be extremely rewarding if it's done like well enough. Yeah, so I will say this: it's not that well done here, but it's something. So when we talk about audio, that should hopefully come over. Let's see if it works. So we should get we should hear a swing sound. If we don't, then that's a little bit weird. But basically, we now have a swing sound, we have a hit sound, and even a death sound. I don't know if that came through. Just give me swing swung. Exactly. It came through. That's awesome. That's good. Okay. That would be really weird if I was like, oh, we're talking about audio and then the audio doesn't come through, right? So that would be one level, just very basic stuff. And then here we could, for example, also add a little bit of music over here. That, it just immediately adds a nice sort of medieval fantasy atmosphere. Let's go. Just beautiful. And just like that, you stack these things on top of each other, and you notice that when the calm music while killing. Listen, okay, that's it happens. But going from this right here, where we had a blob and a blob, to this, I mean, the difference is quite stark here. And yeah, that's like the auditory here. Once again, it continues to go up, right? You can of course do all sorts of other things as well, but pretty good stuff. Then we get timing and haptics. Now we start into get into some things that are slightly more abstract. So here, for example, we could talk about knockback, right? Applying knockback on hits, maybe some physics interactions. I know a couple of people are really into the physics of the modding variety, let's say. So that's one thing. We got things like coyote time or input buffering. So for example, coyote time is when you walk off of a block or ledge that you're still allowed to jump for a couple more frames after leaving the ground. It just feels more responsive. It's one of those things, if you've ever played, for example, Super Meat Boy, that's a game feels unbelievably responsive. Probably one of the reasons because it has like really good timed and really good sort of timing. Remembering button presses even before they're available highly depends on exactly what that is. But for example, if you can jump and you're not quite on the ground yet, but then it remembers that you press the jump button, once again, it feels more responsive. Because usually not all of your inputs are going to be frame perfect. Quite, probably, holy, it feels so bad without coyote time. That's what I mean, right? And it's one of those things, once again, that's sort of when you're making the game, because every single aspect of the game is somehow engineered, right? Every single game, like every single thing in the game is there because it was sort of deemed to be there. It's quite important to like get these things into the front of your mind. Yeah, then we have haptics, for example, controller rumble, just as an example right here, but you could theoretically also have other things like there might be a little bit of an overlap with the visuals in terms of the screen shake and things like that. In terms of timing, you can have time slowdowns, time speedups, right? Hit stop or freeze frames. There's all sorts of things. Maybe even you could possibly even put iframes in here because that might also be a case of feedback. So it's pretty good. So there's a lot of things that you can do with timing and haptics that then sort of put it together. But like I said, this is also, as we step up to in the hierarchy over here, it gets more and more complicated. And the final step over here with harmony, that's definitely not only the most abstract, but also the hardest thing to do. Basically, you want to strive to harmony that everything works together, right? So if you have a shotgun blast, it should probably have a violent screen shake, and it should be like a deep bass-heavy sound and heavy recoil, and then like a satisfying oomph, let's say. But that's as you can see, it's like really hard to describe it with words that are sort of easy understandable. That's why I said it's more art than science. But then again, this is also a very important point. These are sort of like, you should look at these guidelines and try to follow them. And then obviously you could then break them after you're like, oh, I want to do something completely different, right? All of a sudden you're making like a shotgun mod that's in My Little Pony land. And all of a sudden, instead of like a violent bass heavy sound, it does like a different sound, right? Like that's more appropriate in that instance. You can of course break these rules, and that's good, but importantly, there's a reason why you first sort of do things the way that everyone else does it, and then afterwards you sort of try to tweak it a little bit. And sometimes you might discover a really cool sort of you might discover something that's really cool, and then other times you might discover, oh, this is why everyone does it that way, because if I do it the other way, it just does not work. And one example for harmony, I think this is incredibly cool, like genuinely one of the coolest things ever. That is right here, and that is by Starkey. That is Starkey's Mjolnir. We're just going to take a look at the video here. This is by far, I think, one of the best sort of harmony. I don't know. I just love the harmony over here. We'll just take a look at it, and you can see what I mean, right? I mean, here you already start. You start with. Let me make this a little bit. Okay. So you start with visuals, right? You have the auditory. You had even the time dilation and the it's just unbelievable, right? You can see here we get particle effects. We get visual feedback in terms of the hammer. We get, oh my god, we get the visuals and the audio, that. And then just in a second, yeah, here we go, for example. Then we get screen effects over here from the sides. We even get an icon in the middle, right? We get crazy cool animations. And if we listen to this again, wait, just like nice audio, right? It's nice and crisp. And then here in first person, look at this. Boom. I mean, this is just satisfying, right? This is just unbelievably satisfying. And that's sort of what it comes down to, right? It's satisfying. It looks cool. It's nice. You can fly around with it. So for an example right here, I think this is incredibly cool. You can see, you see a border of where enemies are going to be hit, right? With this, with the animation over here. This is what I mean, right? So these things all fitting together and sort of explaining what happens. That's exactly what you want to do. Yeah, there we go. That is one example here from Hytale. Highly recommended to test that out. I think it's absolute, and it's pertinent over here for the harmony. And I want to say that this is the only example. There are 100% way more examples of this, but that was the first that came to my mind because it was so freaking cool. So yeah, that's the thing that you want to strive for. You want to strive for harmony, but this is obviously not as easy as one might expect. So to sort of summarize, like I said, mod design is game design. So you are basically designing a game. I mean, heck, it's called mini games, for example, right? We have an entire category at this point in Hytale even. So it's called mini games. So it should make sense that it is pretty much game design. One of the most important things that you want is a pair of fresh eyes. That is by far, even if it's cringe and it's hard to watch, sit someone down that normally plays modded or video games or whatever, and sit them down and just tell them, this is my mod, this is my game, just play it for 15 minutes. And just look at it, maybe even record it. It is by far probably one of the best research tools that you can do at all. It's like actually amazing. Fresh eyes are so useful because they tell you exactly what you need and what you don't need. And now Zenkuro is going to call me out because I did exactly the same thing for their mod. But yes, that is what happened, by the way. That's 100% what they were going to write. Yeah, there you go. That's what I mean. But like that, this is what it is, right? It's just, it's a really good idea. Then some further reading and some resources. Highly recommend. One of the best things to take a look at after this is Juice It or Lose It. It's on YouTube. It's a short, it's like a 10-minute presentation. It's, I don't know, it's like 14 years old or something. So it's quite old, but it's really, really useful. And it goes exactly into this game feel thing. And then also some other resources here, further reading. I'm not going to go through all of them, but feel free to take a screenshot, take a look at those. Yes, there are actually some really, really useful books on game design as well. It sounds a little bit crazy, but it is indeed true. And I highly, highly recommend to take a look at those. And that it can just be useful for you to, read more, learn more. And then on YouTube, there's also all sorts of stuff on that. Like I said, you want to look for game feel or just generally game design. But yeah, that's generally what we have over here. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you have any sort of question, we can do like a very short sort of question if you have anything that's like super pertinent. But yeah, it was a great 2 minutes. Well, good thing that this was streamed on YouTube. So you can always go to the HytaleModding YouTube channel. And you can watch it again. You can watch the entire thing again. Surely Neil will have the link. There we have it. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, basically the last couple of days, I mean, we're like halfway through the mod jam, right? So I definitely do think that the polish is now in order. So think about this, right? Like try to add some more feedback, try to add some more visuals, try to add some more particles, audio, have it all fit together. How and when do you prioritize feel, looks versus functionality? The struggle to justify focusing on the vibe of the mod when the mechanics aren't polished. I do think that you definitely have to make sure that obviously it's functional. I think it's like an 80-20 principle, right? Get it like 80% functional and then try to get the feel right. Because sometimes the even though you think that the functionality is not quite there, it might actually be that the vibe is off, and that's why it doesn't feel functionally correct. You can also think about it like that. That's that could also be the case.
This is true.
Maybe that makes sense.
One of the best workshops we've ever had. I mean, we've only had 2, but of course,
I
we'll
mean,
have more in the future.
listen, at least in the top 2, right? I mean, for now. So
definitely, yeah. So for the ones that just joined late, I do recommend rewatching it on YouTube because it does go over information that will help you go into your mod. That will definitely, like, because right now, as Coppen said, you're finishing off your mod. Even if you're not, you're going to be in the next 2 days. So it will help you improve your mod, not just for the mod jump, but in general, like all your mods will be improved if you're not, like, if you don't already know about this.
yeah,
Yeah, that
exactly.
thing was I did a ping on the modding news to invite people. Yeah, all right.
Oh, I see. And then yeah, I see. Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, all right.
Awesome stuff. And also the new pre-release came out.
Yep.
Thank you, Joe. Well, thank you so much for your attention. Definitely pretty cool stuff, and I am very excited to see the mod jam entries. And I will say this: if if Pacific Byte places again, then he's going to be banned from future mod jams. Okay, that's what I'm going to say.
Of course.
I kid, of course, but like still, then he has to jump in with an alias. Okay, next time he has to jump in with an alias.
Yep. We might actually make a video out of this of this VOD, so people can reference it easier. But yeah.
100%, yeah.
Yep. All right. I will end the stream so you guys can rewatch it easier and on 2x for the ones that are rushing.